What is going on, guys? It's Thursday, and you know what that means. Time to crack open something cold. But first, I ran across some gear that needs to be serviced, so I'm going to run that down to the shop. Got my reg in a reg bag, and I got a Aqualung Chronos that I'm sending in. I can't tell you how many dives I have on it, but manufacturer recommends that your regs get serviced every year to 2 years. I service mine every year because of the amount that I dive. And I also ran across a tank that needs to be VIP'd. Let's see if we can. Your tanks also need to be VIP'd every year, visually inspected. They'll give you a sticker with a month and a year, so you'll know when it needs to be visually inspected again. Also, check your hydro date to see if you're up for hydro. Visual inspection is every year. Hydro is every 5 years, and they'll give you a stamp. You can see where this one was made in June 2011. I had it hydroed in October of 2016, and so that means it'll be due to be hydroed again next year, October of next year. So I'm going to run this down to get visually inspected, drop off my reg to get serviced. I encourage you guys to check maintenance on your gear. If your housing, the buttons are starting to stick on it, that's probably a good indicator that it needs to be serviced. If it's been more than a couple of years, that's probably a good indicator for it to get serviced as well. Look at the VIP on your tanks, the hydro on your tanks, and see when the last time your gear was serviced. And when we get back, we're going to crack open something cold and talk about backscatter and how to get rid of it in your photos. I'll see you guys in the studio. Alright guys, we're back in the studio. We're going to talk about backscatter and how to remove it from your photos. I've cracked open a cold cider. We'll see if that helps with the edit. So let's get started. We've got a turtle photo here. I'll put a link down below where you can download the raw file and follow along, or if you want to work on your own image, that's fine too. You can see some of the backscatter in the photo, and I guess we can start with what backscatter is, and the best way to avoid it is to adjust your strobes and light your subject properly. Backscatter is just particulate matter in the water, inside the water column, that gets lit by the strobes. There's not a lot you can do about it. In some cases, you're going to get some little bit of particulate matter that gets lit up, but the main source of backscatter is when your strobes are lighting the water column in front of your subject. So you always want to feather your strobes out so you're catching just the edge of the light is converging on the point of your subject. And that's probably the best way to reduce backscatter the most. But if you still have some backscatter in your image, you can take care of it in Lightroom and Photoshop. And that's what I'm going to show you guys today. So on this turtle photo, a couple things we'll start off with. Go into the develop module. You can press D or go up here and click develop. Remember, G goes to the library, and D goes to the develop module. So inside there, I'll probably do a couple of things first that has nothing to do with the backscatter. Well, I guess it kind of does. So I don't like the crop on this image, so we'll go ahead and recrop it, and that'll get rid of some of it so we don't have to work on it. And let's see here. I want to try to keep some of the surface of the water. Maybe bring this guy into the bottom quadrant there. Let's see how that looks. It's not too bad. It'll do for the purposes that we have today. All right, so we'll go in to lens correction, activate that. It tells us what lens we were using, and it adjusts for chromatic aberration and barrel distortion. And just turn that on and off so you can see what it did. Go into basic. Our exposure looks like it's a little too hot. Maybe about half a stop. Push our contrast up somewhere around 15. Bring our highlights down somewhere around 75. Open up our shadows a little bit. Now when I start working with white point and black point, if you hold down your option key, I am not sure what it is on PC. You can hold that, and when you click, as you click and drag, when you start seeing some color on the white, that's when you know you're starting to hit your black point. And the more you drag it, the more black will show up. So if we drag it all the way down, let go, see it's pretty dark. But if we go up till we just start to get some color showing up, maybe a little less. There we go. Same thing with whites. Hold down Option on a Mac. And you don't want any colors to show up on this, because what happens there is that it means that it's going to be blown out and there will be no color in that area. So if we drag this way over, you can see it's super blown out, and if we hold down Option and click, you can see all those blown out spots. And basically what that means is there's zero information there. So if you were to print this, no ink would be laid down in that area. It would just be paper. So we want to drag that back till it just turned black. Something like that. Then we can add a little bit of clarity, just a dash. And feel free to play around with these sliders. The best way to figure out what they do. They have beside them in their name, basically it tells you what to do: exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, clarity. But if you just click, drag it, you can see it really over sharpens. Basically that's what clarity is like mid-tone sharpening. If you bring it all the way back, it kind of flattens it out a little bit. Double click, resets it to 0, and we want to add just a little bit. I misspoke. Clarity is mid-tone contrast, not mid-tone sharpening. So just a little bit of mid-tone contrast, something like that. And again, if you hold your, if you click your backslash key, you can see where you started to where we are. You always want to try to keep up and see what all you've done, what the changes are looking like. All right, so now let's talk about backscatter and these bubbles up here that we don't need. So what we could do is click on the clone stamp tool, which click heal. And the reason I don't use this often is because it does a mediocre job, in my opinion. Photoshop's heal brush is much better, and it has a lot better cloning options and healing options. But if you have just a couple little specks that you need to get rid of, there's no need to launch Photoshop. We can take care of it right here in Lightroom. Make sure your brush is big enough to cover your spot. Do a little click and drag. It'll sample from somewhere. Don't like where that's sampled from. You can move your sampled area. If you run our cursor off the image, it'll hide the healing brush, and you can see how good of a job that it did. Now, if you're having a hard time finding all your spots, Lightroom has a great little trick here called Visualize Spots. You can click on that. Might make your image look a little weird, but it definitely shows all the spots that you have. And it looks like we had a little bit more than we realized in the beginning. So you can go in here in Lightroom, continue to muck about with these guys. You can turn off Visualize Spots. You can see that it's getting rid of those spots that we clicked on with our healing brush. But because we have quite a few, and we have these guys over here, it'll probably be better to launch this into Photoshop and take care of them there. It's a pretty quick and easy process. So we can right click, edit in, and edit in Adobe Photoshop, or you can go up under Photo, edit in Photoshop, or as you can see, you can press Command E on Mac and probably Control E or Alt E on PC. Again, I'm not even going to try to throw the PC keys out there. I don't know them, but maybe I'll learn them for you guys. So while that is launching, I think it's time to take another drink. Let's go over here into Photoshop and see, we got our image open. All right, so just like I told you guys last time, I work on a dual monitor setup. So I have my palettes on a separate monitor. I'll drag them onto the screen so you guys can see them. So we need to create a new layer. You can go Command J, that'll create a new layer, or you can click and drag which layer you want to duplicate down into the new layer icon, and it'll create a new layer for you. So right now our background, we're going to relabel original. And then we are going to do cleanup one. And we're going to label this one clean up 2. The reason for that, I'm going to show you guys 2 ways to get rid of backscatter in Photoshop. The first one are going to be with our healing and cloning brushes over here. So these are J spot healing, healing brush, and patch tool. They all fall under J, and if you click J, it'll give you that tool. If you hold Shift J, it'll cycle through those tools. So, spot healing brush, make it about the size that you need. I'm actually going to switch to my pen tool here. Make it about the size that you need. You can go through, basically just touch these guys up. Similarly with the healing brush, where the spot healing brush, it samples from the area around the spot that you're trying to repair. The healing brush tool allows you to pick the area that you want to sample from. So if we want to get rid of this guy here, we probably want to sample for a similar color blue area. So we'll grab here, and it'll sample from there and fix that spot. Similarly, click here. For this guy up here, we click up here. And then you're a little bit in more control of where it's sampling from. Then we have our patch tool. So let's say these bubbles over here we're wanting to get rid of. We can draw a spot, and then we click and drag. We want to try to use this area here. Let's see how good it does. There's a bit of brightness difference. And it's going to work to try to blend those two areas together. If we deselect that, it didn't do too bad. You can see some of the repetition in here, and you can see definitely where it started at. So we're going to try a couple of other ways to get rid of that. And then there's always the original clone stamp tool, which is S, or this little rubber stamp looking thing right here. And if we make a nice soft brush, remember your command keys are your brackets. Make your brush bigger and smaller. Shift and your brackets make your brush harder or softer. So on a soft brush, probably about the size we're going to be working with. So we'll make it a little smaller. And it actually clones from the area that you sample. So if we grab right here, and then go right here, it's literally replacing this area here with that area there. I always have my opacity and or flow set at 20 to 30, depending on what I'm working on. Sometimes I set it even lower, around 5 or 10, and that allows me to build up. So for example, this fish right here, say we want to get rid of him, I'll sample right above, and you can see he starts to go away, but each time I go across, he goes a little bit further away. So that way I can sample from more areas and make it look a little bit more natural that he's gone. Go back over to my history palette here. Put him back. Alright, so that is one way to deal with backscatter. Another way, which we'll talk about on cleanup 2, is to go under filter, noise, dust and scratches. That'll open a dialog box. And if we set the radius down to 1, threshold to 0, see there's really not much affecting the photo. But if we start moving our radius up, say around 38, you can see it starts to blur the whole image. And the higher you go, the more blurry it gets. And if we start taking our threshold up, we can bring some of that detail back. So it's a matter of playing with the two sliders and finding a spot that you like. And you'll see the backscatter up in this area here will start to disappear. So if we take our threshold down pretty low, probably somewhere around 3 or 5. You can see our bubbles start to disappear at the top. Alright, so if we go there, and again, it'll depend on your image, what your settings are. So we'll click OK. Now our image looks great, we're done, and no, our image doesn't look great. How are we going to fix that? We're going to go to our mask button. We're going to hold down Option, and we're going to click on that mask. And that is going to give us a mask filled with black. And if you remember from last week when we were working with masks, if you have white reveals and black conceals. So black will hide anything that's on that layer, and white will show anything that's on that layer. So we have it filled with black, so nothing's showing up. We get a brush, which is B on your keyboard, or this little icon right here on your toolbar. We're going to make a pretty decent size brush, make it nice and soft. We're going to select white because white will show what we're hiding on that layer. And so we're just going to go in and paint. And you can be pretty liberal with a lot of this. When you want to be a little more careful is when you're getting to items like the reef or the turtle or the detail in the water column. But we can go in here and get rid of a lot of this. And that's going to let us get rid of quite a bit. Come over here, touch up some more of these spots. Now, this technique only works on open water for the most part. If you have backscatter that is in front of your subject, you're going to have to do a little bit more work and go in and use your healing brushes and cloning brushes. But otherwise, you can just be pretty liberal about this stuff. Doesn't take much to get in here. hold down the space bar and that gives me my hand tool. That'll allow me to move my image around while I'm zoomed in. Command O, or excuse me, Command 0 will bring that back to fill the frame. And it sounds like there's a delivery here. The dogs are going nuts. I wonder what my wife got from Amazon. All right. So that looks pretty decent. Still have a few of these to clean up. I'm not gonna sit here and make you guys watch me paint every little blemish out, although most of them are gone. So from that, we'll hit Command S, which will save, and it will take that back into Lightroom. Command W will close it. All right, back in Lightroom, we hit G to go back to our library, and you'll see our Photoshopped file and our Lightroom file. So we're going to open up our Photoshop file in the develop module. So we'll hit D. Everything's still looking pretty good. See if there's any other little changes we want to make. I feel like our blue in the background is a little too light. So we can go into HSL. We can find our blue hue, and we can adjust our blues. We want to make it a little more blue, a little more cyan, a little more purple. So we'll pick one that we like. Probably looks like we're going to be around +5. We can go into saturation on our blue channel, and very similarly we can make it a little more blue. Yeah, and if you adjust, take all out, make it gray. But let's just break out our colors and be a little more effective with them. In our luminance, we can go to blue and we can darken it a little bit. And that might be a little much. So let's pull the saturation back down a little bit. Maybe somewhere around 20. Darkness on it. Somewhere around 10. Looks like we're landing at 14. So that'll darken the background a little bit. We can go back into our basic part of the develop module, and it retained all of the stuff that we did before, but now if we wanted to add more contrast or again work with our highlights to bring those down a little more, let's see if that does anything good. Yeah, it's not too bad. Looks like somewhere around -40. And if we click here where it was pretty hot, looks like there's plenty of good detail there. So we can go up to our graduated filter, activate that. We feel that the top is still a little too bright. Let's reset all of this. If you double click on effect, it'll reset everything in here. I want to drop our exposure a little bit. We'll say 3/4 of a stop. Bring that down to here, somewhere in here. And come over and adjust that. We can see those changes in real time. That's about 1/4 of a stop. Turn that on and off. Feel like that's pretty good. The thing that we're trying to deal with is we have the surface of the water here, which is good, but we don't want it to be so bright that it takes away from our subject. So we're just adding a little bit of a graduated filter. You can see it here. And we've taken the exposure back on the top on that filter about a quarter stop. And I think that looks pretty decent. We also have a little bit of stuff going on down here, so we can do the same thing, click and drag. And if we drag at an angle, cover some of that up, we can make that a little less. So right there. If we want to darken that a little bit more, about half a stop. And again, we can turn that off, turn it back on. You can see the differences. And that's just going to bring our focus back onto our turtle here. I think everything's looking pretty good there. We'll hit G, that'll take us back to our library. And before we compare these two, I just want to talk to you guys really quick about color and light underwater. So I'll open up these photos here, get in the develop module, hit the backslash key so you can see where we started at. So my strobes didn't fire on this image. So you can see that there's really not a lot of color other than like blue and brown. You'll see there's a lot of red and green and brown through this coral and growth. And the rash guard's blue. This is kind of a purple color, which the flashlight should be pink. Your reds here are super dull. The only reason they're still red is because they were bright plastic. And our safety sausage back here, I don't think you can even tell it's orange. But I did some work on the image, and this is about as good as I could get it without spending hours on it. And you can see we've got some red and some green and a little bit of brown back in the coral and growth over here. The skin tone's closer to where it should be. The rash guard's a little more white. We've got some pink back in the flashlight, red in the buttons, and you can see our safety sausage over here is looking orange. But none of it is really still popping. The next image, the strobe fired like it was supposed to, and you can see the difference. Our greens and browns and reds are all really popping over here. Our rash guard is white. Our buttons are red. Our safety sausage is orange. You can definitely tell that this is a pink, and the image just looks a lot better. So it's worth investing in strobes. It's really going to take your images up to a whole new level. And with that, we'll go back to the library, back to our regularly scheduled program. We'll compare our beginning photo of our turtle. So if we select our turtle, right click, create virtual copy. We can open that in the develop module. We can go down and click reset, and that's going to take it to where we started. And we'll go G back to the gallery. We'll select these two. N is survey mode, and it lets you compare them side by side. So you can see how we've got rid of all the bubbles between cropping out and going into Photoshop and using our new tool set. And you can see where we darkened the image, changed the exposure, and changed the brightness. We really didn't have to do too much as far as color correction with vibrance and things like that. Strobes really add the color back in for you. And you can see where we darkened the image over here and at the surface just to bring our focus back onto our turtle. And we can close our original. And hit F, that'll take us to full screen. I think that looks pretty good. So that'll wrap us up for today. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys are drinking for Thirsty Thursday. Cheers. So we'll go in, lens correction. Mother trucker. Back in the studio, I just cracked open a cold cider. It's smooth.